What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the second Ship My Money show of today, Wednesday, May 21st, talking about tonight's MLB main slate. Hopefully the early slate went well for you all. Pretty crazy slate. Hunter Brown was not good. Hunter Brown also was hurt by a routine fly ball that the wind blew about 400 feet for Brandon Lau. Expected batting average on the Brandon Lau home run today of .010. So hadn't seen that before. Going to see plenty of that in Tampa this summer probably. Interesting slate, but we have a 6-gamer now tonight. The Nats and Braves was postponed about 20 minutes ago. So this show is going to be a little bit different than usual. I don't have lineups built that I'd be playing if the slate started right now because that game getting postponed threw off ownership projections and it would have just been a waste of time. But I do have optimal percentages for players. I can talk about that, talk about every game as usual, other than having my lineups. Jake said batting 500 in terms of starting on time today. I actually was ready for this show on time also, but then I reran my strikeout sim and had another bet to send to subs. So I wanted to get that out before I started the show. So I did start a minute late, but I was actually ready twice, which is still unheard of for me. But yeah, also just, didn't want people to start setting the bar too high if I do 2 shows starting on time in the same day, not trying to raise expectations over here. So starting with the Mets taking on the Red Sox, or I guess before I get into that, as a reminder, you can use the projections that I'm using for the show that I'm referencing in optimal percentages, all of that. They are the ones that you see on the screen from runthesims.com. This is the projection model that those of us at Endgame Syndicate have put together. If you really haven't been paying attention, we bought Run the Sims. We own that site now as well. And while Endgame Syndicate is our strategy side, our strategy site, where we have a bunch of evergreen content for you to help you get better at DFS, Run the Sims is going to be more of our data side, where we have projections, we have sims for NFL. We soon will have sims for PGA. At some point, probably have sims for MLB. They're not up yet, but we do have MLB projections over there now. Really happy with how these have looked. Really happy with everything that I know that goes into them. If you've watched my shows over the years and you've seen me talk about something that I think is important that maybe isn't always reflected in industry projections, there's a very good chance that they are reflected in ours. So really, really excited to be using this. Those are the projections I'm using during the show. You can sign up using the link in the description below. Use promo code UDAMLB. Get 10% off. That is through May 31st, that promo code. So take advantage of that. Starting with the Mets taking on the Red Sox. Garrett Crochet going for the Red Sox. Tyler McGill on the mound for the Mets. So we have 2 solid pitchers in this one. The game is in Fenway Park, which always means that there is some risk. But 2 solid pitchers in this one. Tough spot for both of them. The Red Sox offense is solid. The Mets offense certainly solid as well. So it's one of those spots where projections probably kind of tend to middle a little bit, but with it being a 6-game slate, you're going to see ownership coming into both sides anyway. Boston so far this season ranks 12th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. They do have a 22.8% K percentage, which is 7th highest. So it is a solid strikeout spot for McGill, but also a dangerous spot for Crochet going up against the Mets. Since the start of the 2023 season, the Mets active roster only has a 20.5% strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching. If you go back to the start of last season, their active roster, 19.8%, ranks 23rd. 124 WRC plus as well is 3rd best. So very, very tough spot for both of these guys. But 27% projected ownership right now coming into Tyler McGill at 8,300. Garrett Crochet pulling right now about a 53% ownership projection at 10,500, despite the price tag, despite the matchup. And I think it's fine. In terms of optimal percentage, we right now have Crochet coming in quite a bit lower, like still being optimal a high percentage of the time, around 26%, but not as high as the field. For McGill, it's a little bit closer, 27% projected ownership, 19% chance of being optimal. The reason that the optimal percentage is going to be a little bit lower on Crochet is probably mostly the price tag. Like when you think in terms of pure optimal percentage, the more expensive pitchers are typically going to get dinged a little bit more, because if you could just play the slate out a million times and choose the lineup that actually scores the highest, it's going to be just taking like all the perfect hitters and then some cheap pitcher that randomly has a good game. So you will see the more expensive the pitcher is, their optimal percentage tend to get deflated a little bit. So I wouldn't look at that as a reason to like actively avoid Crochet or anything. You still have plenty of 9 other spots in your lineup to be different. But he is probably going a little bit over-owned here. He has been really good this year, though. I know he had made comments the other day that he wasn't really happy with his performance, but since the start of last season, 33.3% strikeout percentage. So far this year, 29%. It was 35% last year. So like his numbers are down. Strikeout percentage down to 29%. Stuff plus is down to 112. Pitching plus is down to 103.5. That's his biggest drop off. It's a 12-point drop for him in pitching plus, but all of those numbers are still very good. Fastball velo is down 2 miles an hour from 98, but still at 96. So like, yeah, maybe he's not the Garrett Crochet that we saw last year where he was unbelievably good, but he's still clearly one of the better pitchers in baseball. The biggest concern here is just the price tag combined with the park and the matchup, but 6-game slate, you're kind of nitpicking when you start getting into red flags on somebody as good as Garrett Crochet. And then McGill on the other side has looked good this year as well. 29% strikeout percentage is up from 27% last year. 110 stuff plus is up from 103.5 last year. Pitching plus is up from 99.5 to 108.3. Everything for him has looked very good. I did want to double check exactly how deep he's been working into games. Most recently, 2 2/3, gave up 4 runs, 72 pitches got pulled. 77 pitches got pulled after giving up 4 runs against the Cubs. So a couple of rough starts for him against the Yankees and the Cubs. But we did see prior to that, 90 pitches, 5 innings against the Cardinals, 105 pitches, 6 1/3 against the Nats. The reason I mentioned this is that he is somebody that has a little bit of an injury history. And I did notice we have him projected just shy of 5 innings here. This might be a spot where I bump him slightly, just because I think that like he's fully healthy now. And so if he pitches reasonably well, he's probably going to give you like 6 innings or so. So I do think he might be getting penalized a little bit too heavily as far as just circumstances go, injury, kind of being limited, and then having back-to-back bad starts where he got pulled earlier than he normally would. But one way or the other, even at the current projection, he's showing up as optimal 19 to 20% of the time. I might end up getting that a little bit higher, but either way, he's been very, very good this year. Certainly more talented than an $8,300 price tag. It is a solid strikeout matchup, like I said. Also, clearly a dangerous matchup in Fenway against this offense. Offensively here, clearly both of these offenses are going to give you pretty strong negative correlation and upside against the field, just given the amount of ownership that is going to come in to both pitchers. That being said, sub 5% ownership projected across the board for the Mets. Not overly surprising given how good Crochet is. I do think that they're going a little bit under-owned, but optimal percentages on everybody here still below 10%. So low-owned, solid negative correlation against the field. Obviously characteristics that you're happy to get to in tournaments, but still a very low probability team in terms of succeeding. Francisco Lindor has the highest optimal percentage at about 9%. Pete Alonso's been great this year, has the platoon advantage. He's at about 8%. They are relatively expensive, though, for a matchup with Garrett Crochet. You're not getting any real discount on them for the difficulty of the matchup. Juan Soto, 5,200, about a 6% chance of being optimal. So basically, I think the Mets, if you want to play the negative correlation game, there are certainly worse teams to do it with. I've done it with the White Sox this year. I've done it with the Rockies plenty of times. At least the Mets are a real team. So you have that, but obviously a tough spot against Crochet. On the other side for Boston, pretty much the same thing as the Mets. They look a little bit better because McGill's not quite as good as Crochet, but you're getting like 5 to 10% ownership on most of Boston. Nick Sogard right now getting the most ownership, batting 6th at 2,700. He's showing up as optimal about 10% of the time, along with Alex Bregman. 8% optimal rates to Duran, Abreu, Devers. So neither of these teams offensively look like a priority in terms of chances of success, guys that you want to be building around. For both of them, the strongest case that you would make in tournaments are simply Fenway Park plus high pitcher ownership, plus low hitter ownership, and quality offenses. If we look at the two pitchers to see if we can kind of single out weaknesses, there's nothing really there on Crochet. 34% strikeout percentage against lefties, 28% against righties. That's still really good. 146 expected ISO to righties, sub 100 to lefties. So he's worse against righties. He's still really good against righties. Tyler McGill on the other side, 137 expected ISO with a 33% K percentage against right-handed hitters so far this year, just shy of a 100 expected ISO to lefties with a 25% K percentage. So pretty much the same thing with both of these guys. As far as like, you can't really even narrow down an advantageous matchup outside of just choosing the best hitters on the team. And I guess, preferring a platoon advantage like you typically would. Jake said, I thought Sogard was out of my life 3 years ago. Different Sogard. This is not Eric. Eric, probably the most annoying, it's got to be up there with like a Rise, like just annoying hitters to take pitchers against. I hated that guy. Like, he wasn't good at hitting, but he would just bat lead off, foul off 15 pitches, and your pitcher's like in pitch count trouble before he even gets to the second hitter. But different Sogard. Moving on to the Rangers and Yankees, saw it mentioned in chat. There is rain concern in this one. Right now, it looks like it's probably okay. But if they late start it, it's probably in trouble, and I would scratch it. Definitely one to keep an eye on. We still have a little over an hour before lock, a little over an hour and a half. I read around an hour and a half before this game actually starts. So definitely one to keep an eye on. Make sure that rain's not moving in earlier than forecasted. It seems like there's going to be rain around, probably some light rain early on, and then getting worse as the night goes on. So that's why if you get the late start, you probably just say screw it and move on. But if they do start the game, just hope that they're able to get far enough into it, that they complete it before the rain gets too heavy. With the way things look right now, I don't think that I would do anything like other than just hope it works out. I wouldn't on a 6-game slate with the current forecast. I don't think that I would like scratch pitchers. You have Jacob deGrom in this game. I don't really want to be removing Jacob deGrom on a 6-game slate. He's too good. You have Ryan Yarbrough getting 14% ownership as well for the Yankees. So like, you have pitcher ownership in this game about 50% combined. So it's an important game for pitchers, and it just doesn't look clear cut enough that I would want to cut out pieces that are that important to this slate without the forecast getting worse. For hitters, kind of the same thing. Like, you run the risk of the game ending early because, and obviously, that's bad if they don't get their last at bats, but I don't think it looks bad enough at the moment that I would do anything. But again, certainly could change. Definitely keep an eye on that. Starting with the pitching here, I alluded to it, but Jacob deGrom going for Texas, Ryan Yarbrough going for the Yankees. So clearly, again, a dangerous spot for a very good hitter on this slate. 10K Jacob deGrom taking on the Yankees. There is strikeout upside here. We saw this Yankees team start off the season by really not striking out much at all. They're up to a 22% strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. That is 11th highest in the league. So as expected, they are trending up. They aren't a team full of guys that strike out a ton, but they do have strikeouts in their lineup, particularly towards the top of the order typically. And you are seeing that, start to creep back up a little bit. Jacob deGrom, not what he once was, but certainly still good so far this season, striking out 26.5% of hitters, 107 stuff plus, 126 pitching plus is insanely good. All of those numbers are down from last year, but also kind of very similar to Garrett Crochet. All are still very good. 126.1, I don't actually know. I'm guessing it's the highest pitching plus in the league, even though it's down from 131 last year. If it's not the highest, it has to be really close. 107 stuff plus, like I said, just well above average stuff, and still an above average strikeout percentage, even if it is 5 points lower than last year. So you run the risk, obviously, of the Yankees doing damage. They have really good hitters. They're in Yankee Stadium, but you also have one of the, if not the most talented pitchers on the slate. We actually have a slightly higher projection, at least when I ran my stuff, on deGrom than Crochet. Not by a wide margin, but that's going to just be driven by strikeouts mostly, I think. Strikeout percentage, rather, because the Yankees do strike out more than the Mets. They are an easier team to strike out. You have comparable strikeout stuff between deGrom and Crochet, probably a little bit better for Crochet at this point. But I think this is a spot where if you tell me that you think it should be Crochet, I don't really have a very strong argument. Like, he's really good also. But I did think it's interesting that right now there's lower projected ownership coming into deGrom at a cheaper price tag, and we actually have him projected slightly higher. So I assume that I probably, if the slate started right now with the current numbers I have, probably would have a little bit more deGrom than Crochet. But again, I don't think you're really going wrong with either one. I think they are very similar plays in that they are both extremely talented. They're both likely to pitch well. They're the two best projected pitchers on the slate, but obviously facing the Red Sox in Fenway and facing the Mets in Fenway and facing the Yankees in Yankee Stadium are two of the tougher spots that you could be in. But they both look pretty good. Ryan Yarbrough, Josh just asked about him in chat. Certainly playable today. Again, just kind of a function of a 6-game slate type of thing. And also a pretty solid matchup against Texas, this version of Texas. We've seen them underperform this year, but then also you have Corey Seager on the injured list. So that just weakens the lineup pretty significantly as well. I do think this team bounces back, going forward. Like, I don't think they're going to be as bad as they have been. You don't have Jock Peterson in the lineup, so that takes away a free 2 or 3 strikeouts. But you have had, Garcia kind of underperformed this year. Semien has certainly underperformed. But Wyatt Langford's good. Young's good. We know Garcia and Semien are quality hitters historically. But it is a decent matchup here for Yarbrough, all things considered. This is not a slate where you have a lot of great matchups. Like game 1 we just talked about, you have the Mets and the Red Sox. You don't really want guys against either of them outside of, obviously tonight, both pitchers being in play. But, you don't love taking pitchers against the Yankees. That's not a great matchup. Padres, Blue Jays, not a great matchup for either pitcher. Coors Field, the Rockies are still the Rockies, but Coors Field isn't perfect. Angels, A's, the Angels, obviously a good strikeout matchup, but still have some power. And then Dodgers, Diamondbacks, 2 of the toughest matchups you can get. So in the context of the 12 offenses playing today, Texas is one of the worst offenses on the slate, even though I don't think they're actually a horrible offense or anything like that. Ryan Yarbrough, in his most recent outing, threw 67 pitches. He threw 64 in the one before that, went 5 innings on May 11th against the A's. I would guess that the Yankees are happy to get 5 innings from him here. Maybe they let him go 6 if he's really pitching well. But at 6,500 on a 6-game slate, I think from a value standpoint, he looks fine. He's projected for about 15% ownership. Have him showing up as optimal about 15% of the time as well. Offensively, you do get the Rangers in Yankee Stadium, so there is obviously a very high ceiling for them. They are facing a pitcher in Yarbrough who isn't bad, but also isn't great. So I do think that they're somewhat interesting. They're also really cheap, but still in terms of optimal percentages, most of them just showing up in that like 5 to 10% range. That's about where their ownership is projected as well. Going back to last season, only a 136 expected ISO allowed to right-handed hitters for Yarbrough, 125 to lefties. So he's not a very good strikeout pitcher, but he is pretty good at limiting quality contact, not giving up a lot of power. 3K Marcus Semien looks like the best play from Texas, showing up as optimal about 10% of the time. As I mentioned, he has certainly struggled overall this season, but since the start of last season against left-handed pitching, does have 220 plate appearances, 354 expected WOBA, 184 expected ISO. That's good enough production for a 3K hitter. Josh Young, only 3,500, 8% chance of being optimal. Looks like a pretty solid play. Haggerty is leading off at 3,300, maybe gets pinch hit for later on in the game, but he is cheap and batting leadoff, so he has that working in his favor. We have a 21% chance of him being pinch hit for. He is a switch hitter, so it wouldn't be a platoon thing. It would be more of probably that a righty comes in and they would rather have like Jock Peterson hit or something for whatever reason. But still a decent value there. Wyatt Langford is the only expensive hitter in this lineup at 5,100. He does give you stolen base upside in addition to power upside. We have him with a reasonable 0.21 stolen base projection here in addition to 0.15 home runs. So neither of those jump off the page as being great, but it does speak to the ceiling that he has. Again, another guy here with like a 7% chance of being optimal. So the Rangers just kind of look like another secondary team here. You're getting some negative correlation against Yarbrough. Power said Roth just dropped Texas, New York to yellow. Always like to see that. Makes decision-making easier. Yeah, I think Texas from a value standpoint and upside standpoint in Yankee Stadium is fine. But again, you don't have the best hitters in this lineup. You don't have a great matchup against Yarbrough. On the other side, clearly difficult matchup for the Yankees. Sub 5% ownership to everybody. I assume that Aaron Judge actually ends up being like 8% or something because Aaron Judge's projected ownership is pretty much always going to be lower than his actual because everybody loves to click Aaron Judge. That said, sub 5% optimal percentage on everybody. If you want to play some $6,100 very low owned Aaron Judge, Be my guest. There's nothing wrong with it. The dude's amazing. He's in Yankee Stadium, which every game that goes by, it seems more and more like Aaron Judge completely tailored his swing to this ballpark this season. He hit another one yesterday. For anybody that saw that, I think it was 8th inning home run from Judge. Just absolute Yankee Stadium home run. Little pop up to right field. I think it hit the top of the wall and bounced over. But you're seeing him just more and more hit these little fly balls to right field when he's at home in Yankee Stadium, and they're just home runs because he's 6'8", and if he hits the ball in the air to right field, it's gonna have a chance to get out. And it's fun to mock that he's just hitting these little league home runs, but all credit to him. He's a good enough hitter and smart enough that he's just taking advantage of where he plays, and you're getting him in Yankee Stadium here. So obviously, very high ceiling for him no matter who he's facing, and you're getting that ownership discount against DeGrom. That said, you do also have plenty of good outfield plays, and he is relatively expensive. You have Shohei Ohtani later, going for the Dodgers, in addition to plenty of other outfield plays. So no real priorities from this game, I don't think, outside of pitching. No offensive priorities. Goes without saying, the Yankees are a high upside offense. I think that Texas is interesting given their value and supposed upside if they figure out how to hit, but nothing that stands out as a true priority outside of like DeGrom and then getting to some Yarborough for value. San Diego taking on Toronto in a game between two of the most difficult offenses to strike out in baseball. For the Blue Jays, it is Kevin Gausman. For the Padres, it is Randy Vasquez. The bet that I was making that made me late to this show was getting Randy Vasquez under 2.5 strikeouts at -106 on FanDuel. If that is still out there, I posted that one for my Dub Club subscribers earlier. If you're interested in strikeout bets, that link is in the description below as well. But Randy Vasquez does not get strikeouts, and he's facing a Blue Jays team that does not strike out. Vasquez is $5,500. He's getting like 6% ownership just because he's cheap and it's a 6-game slate. He showed up as optimal about 10% of the time. But the thing you have to keep in mind with these dirt cheap pitchers, and we're going to see it again in Colorado, is the inverse of what I was saying about Garrett Crochet. When you're just talking optimal rate, you have to keep in mind that you're using hindsight analysis. Basically, you're saying, okay, what hitters hit 2 home runs and a double? Let me throw them all into a lineup and then just grab the pitcher that scored 12 points. When obviously, realistically, you don't get to make your lineups like that, and you're not going to have every hitter that goes nuts on a slate. So the optimal percentage for the cheapest pitchers is going to be overstated. The optimal percentage for the most expensive pitchers is going to be understated typically. So long way of saying, if you're playing a bunch of lineups and you get a little bit of Randy Vasquez and you want to hope that he just has the best game he's ever going to have, then go for it. If you're playing a couple of lineups, I can't imagine considering Vasquez. Tough strikeout matchup. Toronto's active roster against right-handed pitching this year ranks 26th in strikeout percentage. They haven't been great in terms of production. They'll probably be better going forward than they have to date. They only rank 18th, but tough team to strike out. And then on the other side, you have obviously a much better strikeout pitcher in Kevin Gausman. He's coming in at $8,800, 16% projected ownership, 15% chance of being optimal. I think ownership just looks pretty much correct on him. He has rebounded this year after a down season last year. Strikeout percentage this season, 22.9%, up from 21.5 last year. Stuff plus is up about 7 points. Pitching plus is up about 6 points. Fastball velo is up 0.5 mile per hour. So you still haven't seen him get back to the really good strikeout numbers that we were getting back when he was, a Cy Young contender, Cy Young winner. But you have seen across the board improvement in his stuff, his ability to get strikeouts this year. That being said, very tough strikeout matchup here as well. Padres ranked 29th in K percentage at just 17.9% against right-handed pitching this year. They are 9th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. They have Arise batting second. Like, this lineup just sucks from a construction standpoint for getting strikeouts because you have Tatis, Arise, Machado, Merrill, Bogarts 1 through 5. Arise is essentially impossible to strike out. The last time I looked, he had a 2% strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year in like 100 and something plate appearances. I'm pulling up their strikeout leaderboard now just to see what it's at this season. But for a team that has good hitters, their good hitters really don't strike out nearly as much as you would expect. None of these guys at the top really strike out all that much at all. Arise obviously being the one that really drives it. But so far this season against right-handed pitching, you have a 1.7 strikeout percentage now for Luis Arise in 121 plate appearances. You have a 14.5% strikeout percentage for Machado, 15.5% for Tatis. Jackson Merrill's at 23%. I think last year it was lower though. He only has 60 plate appearances this year, so I guess I could just actually look back to the start of last year and get a real sample size. Since the start of last year, Jackson Merrill 18.5%, Tatis 18.5%, Bogarts 18.5%, Machado 18%, a rise 2% since the start of last season against right-handed pitching. I didn't realize it was that low. I thought he was like a 6% guy. 505 plate appearances for Luis Arraez since last season, and he has struck out 2% of the time. So just, speaks to how difficult it is to get strikeouts against this team, because 1 through 5, they just aren't going to give them to you. Gavin Sheets batting 6th is at 26%, but then you get back to an 18% strikeout rate for Cronenworth. Hayward strikes out 21.5% of the time, and then Maldonado 33%. So you can pick up some strikeouts against Maldonado and Sheets. Other than that, good luck striking these guys out. So Gausman looks fine just because it's a 6-game slate. He's talented. He's reasonably priced at 8,800, but this strikeout matchup is brutal, pretty much top to bottom with the exception of Sheets and Maldonado. Offensively here, starting on the San Diego side against Gausman, they do look a little bit better in terms of optimal percentage than most of the teams that we've talked about so far. Still nothing great. It is still a quality pitcher in Kevin Gausman, but you do have a pitcher that has historically given up power earlier in his career, predominantly to right-handed hitters. This year, 232 expected ISO to righties, but we have actually seen lefties start doing damage against him as well. 223 expected ISO to lefties so far this year. It was up to 195 last year. So he doesn't have the same sort of splits as far as dominating lefties that he used to have. The reason for that is that his splitter has dropped off over the last couple of seasons. That's a pitch that was really, really good, and he would primarily throw to lefties when he was at his best. And now it's just not as good. So he does give up power to both sides of the plate, and the Padres do have it. Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, Jackson Merrill, all showing up as optimal 10 to 12% of the time. Then it drops off, sub 10% for the rest of this lineup. But I do think that Tatis, Machado, Bogaerts, Merrill grouping is going a little bit under-owned because they're all projected for around 5% ownership right now. Even if, that does go up a little bit, probably not going to come in over-owned, might just get back to the correct ownership. So I am interested in the good Padres bats there. On the other side for the Blue Jays, this is the best matchup that we've gotten so far. Randy Vasquez has drastic splits, though, and it's a Blue Jays team that unfortunately is not set up to take advantage of them. Left-handed hitters this year have struck out 7% of the time with a 293 expected ISO, a 423 expected WOBA. If you go back to last year, 7.8% K percentage, 421 expected WOBA, 233 expected ISO. Righties have an 18.7% strikeout percentage against him, which is not high, but certainly high compared to 7.8. 152 expected ISO, 325 expected WOBA. Righties basically make Randy Vasquez look like a just average-ish, slightly below average maybe, major league pitcher. Lefties make him look like he didn't know that left-handed hitters existed and that he would have to find a way to get them out until he showed up in the majors, and they just started hitting the shit out of him. The problem is that the Blue Jays don't have left-handed hitters. They have 4 lefties in their lineup, but the only ones that actually have power historically, you have Dalton Varsho batting 3rd. You have Santander hitting 6th. Santander has been terrible this year, but generally a good power hitter. Addison Barger hitting 7th. I think you can look there for value. He's 2,800, has about a 7% chance of being optimal. Varsho at 4,200, 8% ownership, 10% chance of being optimal. Santander, 8% chance of being optimal. So Addison Barger, Santander, Varsho, the guys that from a platoon standpoint, I do find interesting. Since the start of this season, Varsho has been great since coming back from the injured list. Only 45 plate appearances, 417 expected ISO. Santander, 143 expected ISO, Barger, 207. Go back to last year, though, to get more reasonable sample size. 168 expected ISO for Varsho, 197 for Santander, 187 for Addison Barger. Those are the 3 that are most likely to take advantage of Vasquez. Obviously, Vlad Guerrero is really good. Alejandro Kirk's really cheap. You can go to those guys. One thing I will mention, too, I mentioned it this morning that we're working on the way that we utilize some of our contact quality data and trying to alleviate a few guys that we kind of have found we have biases towards. One of those guys is Ernie Clement. I think Ernie Clement is a perfectly fine value play. He's 2,500. He's hitting 8th. He does have 14% projected ownership. We have him with a 13% chance of being optimal. He is somebody that I manually will lower a little bit, though, just because I know that bias is currently there. But either way, just a not exciting point per dollar value, but he will let you get to, some better hitters. There's plenty of expensive hitters we like. Obviously, there's expensive pitching we like. Nick said Santander went deep last night, maybe things to come. Yeah, I mean, he's somebody that you can pretty confidently say from today on, his numbers are going to be better than they were from opening day to now. It would be shocking if they're not. He's got a very long track record of being a good hitter. And the other thing, from a DFS standpoint too, is you don't want to wait to see Santander, homer in 4 straight games or something, because right now you're getting him at $3,800. So the price tag right now is skewed very heavily towards the Santander of this season, as opposed to Santander's career, somebody that generally in this spot should be like 46, 47, 4,800 in this matchup against Vasquez. So Blue Jays look like the best team so far that we've gotten to. They still overall don't look amazing. Kirk, 13% chance of being optimal, leads the way. 9% for Guerrero. Highest owned hitters here, Clement, 14%. Guerrero, 11%. Everybody else sub 10, but certainly happy to get some Blue Jays here against a not very good pitcher in Vasquez. Now we get to Coors Field, where the Phillies are taking on the Rockies. Honestly, just wish they weren't on this slate, because it just is such a stupid spot against this terrible Rockies team. You have an implied run total close to 7 again for Philadelphia rather. Colorado up close to 5. Taijuan Walker's not exactly good for the Phillies either. So looking at the pitching here, 8% projected ownership to Walker, 4% to Palmquist. Palmquist's optimal percentage is showing up at like 15%. Again, this is just a function of being 5K. He's not actually anybody that I really want significant exposure to. It's just a function of all of the times that a bunch of expensive hitters do well, and then one of the expensive pitchers do well. Then it's saying, oh, well, we can throw in this 5K guy that scored 10 points. Now he's optimal. It's not saying he does well 15% of the time or anything close to that. So that's one of those you can kind of throw out. 7% chance of being optimal for Walker at 7K, 8% ownership. Mostly just not interested in pitching here outside of if you're playing 150 lineups, maybe getting a little bit. Walker obviously has the better matchup going up against Colorado. He's still not a particularly good pitcher at all. So far this season, striking out 17.5% of hitters. His stuff plus and his pitching plus numbers are both up 6 and 7.5 points respectively since last year. So through 28 innings, his stuff's looked a little bit better than last year, but you're still getting him in Coors Field. He's still not a particularly good pitcher. Offenses are obviously where people are going to be more interested in this game. Starting with the Phillies, still not a ton of ownership coming in here since they are still correctly priced. They're expensive, and you have expensive pitching on this slate. You're seeing kind of the same thing here with the Phillies tonight that you've seen on other slates recently, where you have 10K price tag on DeGrom, you have 10,500 on Crochet. Gossman's relatively expensive. It's not a slate that has a ton of good, cheap pitching that you want to get to, and the Phillies to stack are pretty expensive. 6,200 to Turner, 6,400 for Harper, 6,500 for Schwarber. Some cheaper price tags toward the bottom of the order with Weston Wilson and Johan Rojas. But Castellanos is 5,400, Real Muto 5K, Bohm is relatively inexpensive at 4,300. He hasn't been all that good this year, but does have a track record of being a solid enough hitter. So overall, it's a Phillies team that you really have to pay for, and it's kind of tough to do it on this slate. So it does keep their optimal percentages down in the 5 to 10% range. It keeps their ownership down. Most of these guys coming in around 10%. Trey Turner leading the way at 16%. Alec Bohm at 13%. Real Muto at 12%. Everyone else projected 10 or less. So if you can find ways to get to the Phillies, you don't actually have to worry about the ownership all that much. And it is a good spot, not only against Palmquist, but against this Rockies bullpen that is just not good either. We've seen add-on runs for Philadelphia in this series. Palmquist, 7 starts at AAA this year, 35 innings pitched, did strike out 30% of hitters, but only projects for about a 20% strikeout percentage going forward. Last year at AAA, struck out 18.5% of hitters, did strike out 34% at AA, but projection models mostly not really in love with his strikeout ability, and he did also walk too many guys in the minors. That's something that can really come back to bite you when you make that jump to the major leagues, because not only is it likely that obviously he's walking a high percentage of guys, but minor league hitters generally have worse plate discipline than major league hitters. So he probably also, like if he's walking 12% of guys at AA, he's probably also getting away with, they're chasing more pitches out of the zone. His stuff is playing up more there, where then you get to the major leagues and these hitters just aren't chasing at the same rate as these minor league hitters. So walk percentage can be even more problematic. And then also you're working behind in more counts. You have to, throw more favorable pitches. Guys can do more damage. So it's something that if you see these high walk rates, especially in the lower levels of the minors, like AA, single A, that can really become problematic when you get to the majors, because it's not just about walks. It's about working behind in counts, being able or being forced to throw pitches over the plate where guys can do damage. So that kind of has like a compounding effect. Very long way of saying this guy's probably not very good and doesn't project to be very good, and he's facing the Phillies in Coors Field. For the Rockies going up against Walker, you do get some value here. 17% projected ownership coming into Ezequiel Tovar. He's been one of the more popular shortstops on slates recently. He's still only 3,100. Taijuan Walker, not a great pitcher by any stretch. Going back to last season for Walker against right-handed hitters, only striking them out 16.5% of the time, 255 expected ISO, 397 expected WOBA. Like I said, his stuff has looked a little bit better this year, but still below average. Tovar looks like a very good play at shortstop. Hunter Goodman batting third, 4,400 at catcher, 9% projected ownership, 14% chance of being optimal. I like him quite a bit here at catcher. Ryan McMahon is only 3,800, getting 9% ownership. I don't really know why he is as cheap as he is. He is, despite being on the Rockies, somebody that has always been a solid hitter. 198 expected ISO in 576 plate appearances since the start of last season against right-handed pitching. This year in 132 plate appearances, 252 expected ISO. So it's not even like he's cheap because, he's been bad this year or anything like that. So I like Ryan McMahon. Then you kind of fall off of a cliff. Jordan Beck and Bretton Doyle, both certainly reasonable plays. They are both outfielders, 4,800 for Beck, 4,300 for Doyle. Being in the outfield makes them a little bit less appealing and being kind of correctly priced compared to, Tovar at a weak shortstop position. You think about the shortstop position on this slate. Lindor's facing Crochet. Gunner's not on the slate. De La Cruz is not on the slate. Mookie is on the slate. But it's not, as good a shortstop position as you're normally going to get. So it makes him look even better. So offenses in this game, as you would expect. Angels taking on the A's, another game with a high total over here in Sacramento. For the A's, it's JP Sears. For the Angels, it is Kohanowitz, one of my least favorite pitchers ever. $5,700 price tag for Kohanowitz, $7,900 for Sears. Very low projection on Kohanowitz here. Reasonable projection on Sears at 13.5 fantasy points. On a lot of 6-game slates, that would probably be pretty interesting. On this slate, you do have other, very good pitchers, but still about 10% projected ownership coming into Sears, actually showing up as optimal about 17% of the time at 7,900. It is a good strikeout matchup against the Angels. We see it pretty much every year. The Angels are a good offense, and then Mike Trout gets hurt and everything goes out the window. Since the start of last season, this Angels lineup does rank 11th in WRC plus against left-handed pitching. They rank 17th in strikeout percentage, so it's not as bad as when they are facing righties. You have, the platoon advantage for most of these guys. It's a very right-handed heavy lineup, so that's why you see those splits. Neto, Soler, Ward, O'Hoppe, all right-handed. Adele's right-handed. Rengifo and Moncada will hit from the right side. So the only left-handed hitter that the Angels are likely to have in their lineup is Nolan Schanuel. So that does, make it a more favorable matchup for right-handed pitchers compared to left-handed pitchers. Sears has given up power to righties since last year as well. 209 expected ISO, only a 17.5% strikeout percentage compared to 22% against lefties. So it is a dangerous spot for him. I think that, in the context of this slate, we haven't really had quality mid-range pitching because you had, Gossman at 8,800, you had Crochet and DeGrom for even more. And beyond them, you had, Yarbrough at 6,500, who's fine. But beyond that, you haven't really had much. Like Vasquez isn't good. I don't want the Coors pitchers really. So it kind of just like leaves you with JP Sears as a competent pitcher where it's just like, yeah, okay, let's see what happens if we need a pitcher in this price range. Kohanowitz on the other side. not in. Oh, nope. I just have it filtered by A's. That's why he's not showing up. Kahanowitz on the other side, getting 8% ownership. He's 5,700, showed up as optimal 13% of the time. Again, it's the same thing I was saying with Palmquist. When you get pitchers this cheap, it's just going to overstate him. The one positive thing that I have to say about Kahanowitz, I've said before, I think this is one of the worst starting pitchers to consistently start games. He is very good at getting ground balls. He's not good at getting strikeouts. He doesn't miss a lot of bats. But he does get ground balls. So he does have that working for him. If you just want to play the game of it's only a 6-game slate, I want to get one of these number one, SP1 guys at the top. I want to stack, the Phillies or get good hitters from wherever. If you want to just hope Kahanowitz can give you 5-6 innings of ground balls to shortstop, it's not the craziest thing. He doesn't come with legitimate strikeout upside. He's not a strikeout pitcher whatsoever, despite being 6'7" and throwing 98 miles an hour. He somehow does not get swings and misses. His average fastball velocity this year is 95.5 miles an hour. Strikeout percentage is up from 9.5% last year to 13.5% this year, which, good for him. Still, one of the lowest, or it's lower than every pitcher on the slate other than Vasquez. It's lower than every pitcher that pitched today. It's slightly lower than Sagano. It's below Andre Payante. He doesn't get strikeouts, but he is good at getting ground balls. So, if you just need that cheap pitcher, that's why you're seeing 7-8% projected ownership. Like, it is possible that he just gets a bunch of ground balls and you get, maybe the Angels win the game. He gets ground balls for 5 or 6 innings, and you just get like 17, 18 fantasy points, which obviously would be great at that price tag. But the A's do have a very high implied run total here. They have a lot of guys that, obviously can do damage. They have a lot of power in this lineup. They're in a park that is good for home runs. So very far from being anything close to safe. But he does at least have a skill that, it's not great for DFS, but he does have a skill as far as keeping the ball on the ground. Offensively here, I'd expect to be getting to a lot of this one. I generally have been getting to a lot of A's games in general lately, and I don't think this one's going to be any different. Mentioned the power numbers allowed to right-handed hitters by JP Sears going back to last year. Zach Neto has the highest home run projection here in the game. Taylor Ward is second, and you still have this ridiculous price tag on Ward. I don't know what Taylor Ward did to be priced at $3,500 and just live there, but he's a much, much, much better hitter than that. 245 expected ISO against left-handed pitching in 154 plate appearances since the start of last season. Zach Neto, 219 expected ISO, 19% chance of being optimal for Neto, 16% for Ward, 15% projected ownership to Neto, about 12% to Ward. Joe Adell at 2,800, I think, is interesting, given that JP Sears does give up power to righties and doesn't strike them out at a high rate. Joe Adell is a guy that generally hits the ball hard when he makes contact. He has a lot of raw power. He's not particularly good at making contact, but now you're getting him against this lefty that isn't very good at limiting hard contact and isn't very good at getting strikeouts against righties. That's a really interesting matchup for somebody like Joe Adell. Jorge Soler, very similar mold. Getting 12% ownership, 14% chance of being optimal at 3,400. Logan O'Hoppy's only 3,700. This Angels lineup is very inexpensive with the exception of Neto, who isn't overpriced. He's just like correctly priced. They're very inexpensive. They have plenty of power. Like, you look at the home run projections for the Angels, Neto and Ward, the two highest in the game. Soler right behind Soderstrom. O'Hoppy, 0.21. Moncada, 0.19. He's actually looked like a quality hitter so far this season since coming back from injury. So I think with the Angels, you're getting a combination of upside, value. You're going to have good players around them, and they're not going to be sneaky. Like, you're getting 10 to 15% ownership to basically every hitter on the Angels, but they just look good here against Sears. On the other side, for the A's, you do have that matchup against Kahanowitz that does limit home run upside, assuming he's on, because when he's on, he's so good at getting ground balls. The thing about somebody like Kahanowitz, though, when you don't get those swings and misses, you're reliant on having your two-seam fastball, your sinker movement, and locating well. There's going to be games where he's not at the top of his game locating, and when you have a pitcher that's good at getting swings and misses, has really good stuff, they can have their B or C game and still get by because their stuff is still, even their B and C stuff is just nasty and it's hard to hit. If Kahanowitz doesn't have his best location, his best command, he's just throwing hittable stuff that these guys are going to tee off on. So it's a very fine line for him. But, if he is on, you do get a very frustrating game of ground balls to infielders. And the A's are getting a lot of ownership here. In terms of optimal percentage, actually a bit lower than their ownership, which I'm a little surprised to see just because of how well the A's have looked for us recently. But it probably just has to do with what I was just saying, where, Kahanowitz does keep the ball on the ground. The Angels bullpen has not been very good. So the A's do have the potential for add-on runs as well. We pretty much have like 8 to 12% chance of being optimal for almost every hitter on the A's, but 22% projected ownership coming into a $4,300 Lawrence Butler, 19% to Shea Langoliers, 15% to Nick Kurtz, 12% to Soderstrom, 15% to Urias, 15% to Rooker and Andujar, 14 to Wilson, 10 to Blade. So 10 to 20% projected ownership. 8 to 12% chance of being optimal pretty much throughout this lineup. I think that they are a very high upside offense. They're good. If I get to them, great. But they do look like they're going a bit more over-owned than other offenses like the Phillies or the Rockies or even the Angels on the other side of this game. So that will be something that you want to pay attention to, as ownership updates and everything going into lock. And then finally, going to Dodger Stadium, another very good park for hitting. We didn't have these on the early slate, but we certainly have them on the night slate. Two quality enough pitchers here. Corbin Burnes at 9,300, Dustin May at 7,500. Burnes projected for about 13 fantasy points. May projected for about 11. Good pitchers in terms of, in Burnes in terms of pretty much everything. But for Burnes, he's not a great strikeout pitcher. He's a very good pitcher overall. But we did see, his strikeout percentage start to drop off his final year in Milwaukee. It dropped off last year. So far this year, it's at 22.6% after being at 23% last year. His stuff plus and his pitching plus have both plummeted this year as well. Stuff plus only 101.9, down from 113 last year. Pitching plus 104.8, down from 119 last year. That's a 14-point drop. Fastball velocity is down a little over 1 mile per hour. So Burnes is still a quality pitcher, but we're certainly seeing concerning things from him, and you really have seen it, at least in terms of strikeouts, going back a few years now. And then now you're starting to see the stuff drop off as well. This was, I think a big concern the Orioles had when it came to re-signing him. He said that the Orioles were pretty much adamant that they weren't going to go longer than, I think it was 4 years. And Arizona gave him a 5th year, or it was 3 and 4, whatever it was. Arizona gave an extra year that Baltimore wasn't willing to go. And I think it was, you could see it starting to show up with him in terms of his strikeouts falling off. And then now you're seeing the stuff start to fall off as well. That this guy, might kind of just be starting to move into the downward, trajectory for his career. And then now he has to face this Dodgers team. They have a 5-run total against Corbin Burnes. So sticking with the pitching, first, 9,300 for Burnes, 8% projected ownership, 12% chance of being optimal. If you want to just play Corbin Burnes because he's low owned on a 6-game slate, cool. It's Corbin Burnes. There is still obviously talent there, but brutal matchup. Dodgers have the second best WRC plus in baseball against right-handed pitching. Only the Yankees is higher. The strikeout percentage on the Dodgers active roster ranks 21st. They got rid of Chris Taylor, which lowers that strikeout percentage on their roster by a lot. Clearly, dealing with the top part of this order is just guys. Ohtani will strike out, but he's also really good. But Betts is tough to strike out. Freeman's tough to strike out. Will Smith is arguably the best hitting catcher in baseball this season. Teoscar Hernandez is back. Max Muncy in there. Pages has been solid. Tommy Edman is back. This lineup, we don't have the actual lineup, but the projected lineup just very deep, very good. And it's a tough park to pitch in, good park for offense, great park for home runs. So if you're playing Burnes, I think it's just to be contrarian. And really, it's the same thing with Dustin May. $7,500 price tag is nice, but this matchup against the Diamondbacks is brutal. And then you're getting them in LA. The Diamondbacks active roster ranks 19th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. They're 3rd in WRC plus, behind only the Yankees and the Dodgers. Dustin May is another one of these pitchers that, he should strike out more hitters than he does. His stuff is nasty in terms of, he throws hard, he has movement, but only a 21.5% strikeout percentage this year. 96.7 pitching plus is below average. 96.9 stuff plus is below average. When he's on, he keeps the ball on the ground, even though he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. But this matchup is really tough. So same thing here with May, 8% projected ownership, 13% chance of being optimal. He's just another guy that you're using as a contrarian option. Power said, so no pitchers on the whole slate. No, you have Garrett Crochet, Jacob deGrom, Tyler McGill, and Yarbrough. There's no pitchers on the slate that are that check every box. Because DeGrom, McGill, and Crochet are all in dog shit matchups. But in terms of like priorities, I think there are clear priorities. They just happen to be facing the Mets, the Red Sox, and the Yankees. Moving on to the bats here, I do think this is a very interesting game tournament-wise, offensively, because there's not a lot of ownership coming in. And it's probably because there is, some respect to these two pitchers. But the highest ownership projection right now on Arizona is Corbin Carroll coming in at 12% projected ownership. He's showing up as optimal about 15% of the time. Gabby Moreno, Josh Naylor, Eugenio Suarez, Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll, and Lourdes Gurriel all showing up 10 to 15% in optimal percentage, and they're all sub 12% ownership. All of them except Carroll, sub 10% ownership. When May is on, like I said, he does keep the ball on the ground, generally is able to limit power. It's not an ideal matchup. Only a 131 expected ISO to lefties, 204 to righties so far this year. If you go back to 2023, 149 to righties, 123 to lefties over that larger sample. But you're just kind of playing the talent game with Arizona in a park that's very good for home runs. This offense has a lot of power. They put the ball in play generally, and they have speed. Carroll will run, Marte will run. In particular, we've seen Naylor at times run. So it's just the upside here for Arizona is really interesting at pretty low ownership. Looking at stolen base projections here, Corbin Carroll tied with Ohtani at the top. Perdomo, decent stolen base projection. Some stolen base upside for Naylor, for Thomas, Moreno, Marte will run a little bit. So you have that in addition to power upside. Carroll with the second highest home run projection in the game, followed by Suarez and Marte. So stacking the Diamondbacks seems interesting to me at pretty low ownership. And then similarly for the Dodgers, optimal percentage, not quite as high. Shohei Ohtani at 15%, everybody else 10% or below. 18% projected ownership coming into Ohtani. Everybody else 10% or below. Burns, I talked about him when I was talking about the pitchers, but his stuff hasn't played as well so far this season. 105 expected ISO to lefties, 212 to righties. Strikeout percentage is down. One thing about Burns too, though, is that going back to last season, or just going back, forever, he hasn't been good at holding runners. I do think, and I could be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure I saw it, that on one of the Diamondbacks broadcasts I saw, they were talking about Burns trying to do a better job of controlling the running game this year, but we'll see if that actually happens. It was a big issue for him last year. It was really the only issue for him last year in Baltimore, was if you got on base against Corbin Burns, you were just walking the second, basically. Last season, Burns allowed 41 stolen bases in 194 and a third innings pitched. This year, he's allowed 2 in 45 innings. Last year was by far the worst year of his career at preventing stolen bases. I think some of it may have had to do with Rutschman struggling too, but he was unbelievably bad. At other points in his career, he's graded out as slightly above average to slightly below average. Last year was just unbelievably bad. So at the very least, you have probably a pretty good stolen base spot for Ohtani. The rest of the Dodgers might try to run a bit, but you saw the stolen base projection on Ohtani pretty high. Mookie has a decent one here. So does Hernandez. So does Pajes. So there is some stolen base upside in addition to the power upside for the Dodgers. They're basically getting like 5-ish% ownership across the board, with the exception of Ohtani. So I do like the offenses in this game just from a talent versus ownership standpoint, even though the matchups aren't great. Because the other thing you have to keep in mind, too, is that while none of the pitching on this slate, none of the good pitching on this slate has ideal matchups, most of the good offenses are on the other side of that. So they don't have great matchups either. Like Philadelphia, obviously, great matchup. Toronto, okay, good enough matchup against Vasquez. You would prefer if they had lefties. The Angels, I like their matchup. But like the Mets matchup sucks. The Red Sox matchup sucks. The Yankees matchup sucks. The Padres matchup isn't ideal against Gossman. So there's not that many teams in general on the slate, but then also most of the offenses that you just blindly look at and say like, oh yeah, I want to play the Red Sox. I want to play the Mets. I want to play the Yankees. Like they're facing really good pitching. So it kind of just cycles you back to like, why would I be afraid to go to the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks in LA against, Burns and May, even though they're solid. They're not Crochet. They're not the Grom. So really interesting tournament slate, I think. In terms of optimal percentage, again, because I haven't run my actual lineups yet, pitching, DeGrom, Crochet, McGill at the top. Catchers, Goodman, Ohapi, and Kirk. First base, and Langoliers. First base, Naylor, Kurtz, Guerrero, and Shanwell. Second base, Marte, Clement, Semien. Third base, Suarez, Machado, and Baum. Shortstop, Neto, Tovar, and Bogarts. Outfield, and obviously you can throw Turner in there. Outfield, Ward, Carroll, Soler, Adele, Tatis. Obviously, you can throw Schwarber in there if you can find the salary as well. But it seems like from an optimal standpoint, a lot of the cheap outfielders showing up, probably because of prioritizing the optimal pitching. As far as all stack types go, Angels, Arizona, Athletics showing up at the top. 5-mans, Diamondbacks, Angels, Padres. So again, kind of surprised that the Phillies are not represented higher than they are, but I think it just really has to do with the pricing on the pitching, the pricing on the Phillies, and then probably looking to just get like a Phillies hitter or a couple Phillies hitters into those lineups. But goes without saying, if you can find lineups that you like that have Philly stacks, by all means, but just not showing up a ton in terms of optimal percentage because of their pricing, I think. So that's all I have for you on this one. Thanks for checking out the show. I will throw out a home run pick as well. I've been trying to do that more, and then I just always forget about it. But since I actually have home run projections in front of me, I can go ahead and do it. I think Ohtani's cheating, but I will go to Zach Neto. I like that one a lot. The Angels, I think, are kind of the spot that like mixes the most, where you have a pitcher that struggles with power, you have an offense that has power and the platoon advantage, and a park that'll play up power. So Zach Neto, I think it really stands out that, on this slate, he actually has the second highest home run projection. Plenty of good hitters on this slate, but Zach Neto is my home run pick here. Thanks for checking out the show. Good luck on your lineups. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and use the link in the description below to sign up for the Run the Sims projections. Good luck on your lineups tonight. See you back here tomorrow.